Hi there, welcome to the Upcycle Design Lab. My name's Cindy and I craft using recycled and repurposed materials. If you're new here, I hope you'll stick around and check out some of my other upcycling tutorials. And if you like what you see, you can check the subscribe button below any of my videos to become a subscriber. Also, if you'd like to be notified when I upload new videos, be sure to check the bell icon as well. So here's what I have going on in the lab today. I'm going to be upcycling some corrugated cardboard and some magazines and a few other recycled materials to make a faux metal cat bed basket. I think I've mentioned before, if you've seen some of my other videos, you know we have dogs and cats, and that means that anything that is on the floor gets claimed by the dogs. So currently my cat likes to sleep on top of the dish cabinet in our dining room, and so I just threw a blanket up there for her to sleep on. But even my standards with working with trash, it didn't quite meet, so it looks pretty shabby, and I've decided to try to come up with a more permanent solution. So one of the greatest things about this project, at least in my mind, is that almost all of it we're going to be using repurposed and recycled materials. So to start with, I took a couple measurements from the top of my dish cabinet that I want to put the cat bed, and I just cut an oval shape that fits from a piece of newspaper. And then I have a piece of corrugated cardboard here, and I'm just going to use my paper template to trace out and cut out the cardboard in the oval shape. So I'm just using my Sharpie here to trace around. This piece of cardboard was almost the perfect size on the width, so that was handy. You can use a lot of different things to cut the cardboard. I've used grapefruit knives and scissors. You can do, obviously you could use a, what are those called? X-Acto knife, different things, but for this project I think the scissors are going to be the easiest thing to use. So I'm just gonna cut out my shape, and then this will be the base of the cat bed. So here I've got a piece of 1-inch foam. You can buy foam if you want to. It's kind of expensive, although a small piece like this wouldn't be too much. But this is actually foam that I've saved from an old mattress that we had. And foam mattresses come in a sort of 3 different layers, and there's this thin layer in between that's pretty easy to separate off. And I've done a lot of foam projects lately. So I'm just going to use some straight pins to pin this down. And then I'll trace around it with my Sharpie again, and I'll be ready to cut this foam out. Sometimes the foam is a little tricky to cut if it's thicker. I think this 1-inch foam will be easy enough to cut with just my scissors. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully it will work. For thicker foam, I've used different tools. You could probably use a handsaw. I've used a bread knife. It doesn't give you the cleanest cut, but you can cut it that way. But like I said, I think the scissors are going to work just fine for this 1-inch foam. And once I've got this traced out, I am going to cut sort of on the inside of the line because I want this to fit inside of the cat bed. This will be the first layer of padding. So I want it to be just a hair smaller, or at least the same size as the cardboard piece. So I'm just going to cut a little bit to the inside of that mark. So you can see I didn't get a perfect edge here, but it is thin enough to kind of cut with these scissors. So I'll just continue cutting out this shape, and then we'll cut out the top layer for the pad. So there's my foam piece. And to make the top layer that I want to be able to throw in the washing machine, I'm going to use an old t-shirt, and I'm just going to cut it out of the same, I'm going to cut 2 layers out of it, out of the same oval shape. So for this, I'm going to pin through both layers. And then I'll get my sewing scissors to cut this out. So I don't want to use my craft scissors on this knit. I want to use my fabric scissors. So I don't need to use my marker on this one. I'm just going to grab my scissors and cut around the paper template. Alright, so now I've got my 2 layers of t-shirt cut out, and I'm just going to set that aside, and we'll switch to making the basket. So we've got the bottom of the basket cut with the cardboard piece, and to make the sides of the basket I'm going to be using the rolled pieces of magazine paper. And I've already rolled quite a few pieces here, but we're going to need a whole lot more. So I've got my glue gun heating up over here, and I'm just going to continue rolling some more of these rolls. And to do that, you can use a lot of different things. You could use a pencil, anything round. I just actually use my glue stick because they're right there and they're handy. And all I'm doing is I'm going to roll pretty tightly from corner to corner. And then I just let it loose a tiny bit so that the glue stick will come out. And sometimes tapping it helps, but it usually falls right out. So then once I've got the glue stick out of there, I can go back and just use my glue gun, the little dab of glue, to hold the corner and the whole thing together. So I can just continue on with that. It's a pretty simple process. Like I said, you could use a pencil. You could also, I've tried it where I pull it out before I roll it all the way up, but really the simplest way I've found to do it is just to roll it tightly around the glue stick and then just let it fall out. Now sometimes you let it go too far. That's gotten a little bit big. You could probably still use it, but I'm going to roll that one more time. So it is a little bit of a tricky, you got to get the feel for it to know how much to let loose so that the glue stick will fall out. So you just want to let it loosen up just a tiny bit, and then like I said, tapping on it usually releases the glue stick pretty easily. So that is it for making the paper rolls. Like I said, I'm going to need a lot of them, so I'm going to continue rolling the paper and then we'll be back to do some of the actual weaving. So I'm ready to start building my basket. So I have the base here that I've cut out of the cardboard, and I'm going to take my magazine paper tubes and pinch about an inch to an inch and a half at the bottom, and then I'm just going to glue that straight on to the cardboard, and then it'll fold up to make the vertical pieces of the basket. And since I'm not sure how tall I'm going to make the basket yet, I'm just going to use one piece. It'll probably only be about, half that high, but I'm going to use one piece, and I need to just go all the way around and glue my vertical pieces onto the cardboard. So I'm probably going to need to fold some more pieces of cardboard, but like I said, I'm just going to pinch about an inch and a half, flatten that out, add my hot glue and lay this one right next to the other piece. You want to get them as straight as possible. Now when I get around the curve, I'm probably going to have to overlap these a little bit, so it's not going to be totally smooth on the bottom, but I think that'll be all right. So I've flipped my cardboard piece over, and you can see I'm working with a pretty big and unruly shape right now. But once we get all the way around one time with our weave, it'll shore everything up and it'll be a lot easier to work with. I want to start at the back of the basket just because I'm not sure if I'm going to have an even or odd number of weave. So I may end up with the pattern not quite matching up on the back side. So I want to start back here, and I'm just going to do 1-to-1 weave. So I'm just going to go over one, under one, over one, under one. But like I said, I want to start in the back, and I'm just going to glue my first piece to the inside of my starting point here. So I'm just going to use a little hot glue, and then obviously this piece is on the inside of the tube that I glued it to, so I want it to be on the outside of this tube. The inside of the next one. So I'm just going to pull up every other one so that I can be on the inside and then the outside and then the inside and the outside. And you can flatten out your pieces, or they'll just flatten on their own as you're doing the weave. So you're going to kind of end up with flat pieces of the paper. Now I'm kind of getting closer to the end here, and I obviously need a longer piece than what I have. So the nice thing about the tubes is that you can just slide them together. And I usually put a little bit of glue on them just to make sure that they're going to stay. And then I can continue weaving, and I'll add pieces to make my piece longer as I need to. So hopefully you can see what I've got going on here. I'm taking my horizontal piece that I'm weaving through the vertical pieces, and I want to crease it in half, and then I'm standing it on its edge here. And I want to, like I said, I'm doing a 1-to-1 weave, so I want every other vertical piece to be under and the opposite one to be over my horizontal pieces. So I'm just getting every other vertical piece out of the way here for a second. And then for this first and second rows, you probably want to use a little more glue. I'm just going to glue the two pieces together, and then I'm just folding this vertical piece back out of my way. So hopefully you can see, these might be in, my little tails might be in the way here, but hopefully you can see this this horizontal piece is kind of standing on its edge, and I'm just alternating in and out. And right now I'm just gluing the pieces that are on the inside here, and the other pieces are just laying flat the way they started. So I'm going to keep weaving my way around until I get all the way back to the end, and then I'll do the alternate weave on the second row. All right, so I finished going around with one row, and what I was talking about not starting in the back is, I don't know if you can see, but right here I have two pieces that are going to be on the outside, so they're not going to alternate one to one to one like the rest of the rows, and that's why I wanted in the back, just because these two pieces are going to sort of act as one piece in the weave. So I'm going to go ahead and do a second row. I want to start on the inside of the basket again so that I can glue the edge to the inside, but I'm going to alternate the weave going the opposite direction. So if it was on the outside on this row, this will be on the inside of the next row. So I finished my second row, and you can see the basket is starting to take a little bit of shape. It's still pretty unruly, but I'm just going to continue alternating rows, probably at least 6 rows high, maybe a little bit taller, until I finish the height that I want for my basket. I don't really have to start in the same point every time on the rows, but I do want to make sure that I'm starting on a piece that will be on the outside, so that I always have my raw edges glued to the inside of the basket. So I'm just going to start my third row here. So as you're working, you want to make sure that you're kind of keeping your vertical pieces as straight up and down as you can. You don't want them angling off. And you want to keep your horizontal pieces in a tight weave. So it does take quite a bit of glue. I don't have any fingerprints left because I'm not very careful when I'm using hot glue, but do be careful because it does burn your fingers pretty easily. Anyway, I'll just continue working until I have my 5 or 6 rows. So I just wanted to share a quick tip with you. I thought of this kind of in the middle of doing the weaving, but I just grabbed a few small rubber bands and bound together my vertical pieces in little bunches, which is helping it be much less unruly. So as I'm working, I can just undo a bundle, kind of work with that. And as you work farther and farther up, it gets less, confusing, and the pieces stay out of your way better. But for this first few rows, the rubber bands might help a lot to keep things more easy to keep track of and out of your way as you're working on weaving all of the pieces. So I'm just gonna keep going, and I'll be back when I'm ready to finish off the top. So even though you're working with paper, you can be pretty sort of, you know, rough with it. You don't want to smash it, but you can mold it a little bit as you're working. So as I'm gluing pieces here, I'm kind of shaping the basket as well. All right, so I'm at the end of my 4th row, and I'm just going to cut. Put my little rubber band back on. I'm going to cut this piece a little longer than I need it because I can glue it. It's going to go to the inside of the basket, and then I'm just going to glue it down to secure the end. So I don't know if you can see in here or not. I'm just going to put a little hot glue and then press that end down until the glue hardens a little bit, and then I'll be ready to start my 5th row. I decided just to do 5 rows. That seemed to be a nice enough height for the cat bed. So to finish off the edge, I'm just going around and trimming off my vertical pieces, leaving about 1/2 of an inch above where the last row is. And then I'm going to go back and cover it with some paper. So I'm just going to trim off a few more edges here, or a few more vertical pieces here. So I finished putting the top edge on my basket here, and one thing I did want to mention is that this paper is pretty sturdy, and you can kind of shape it a little bit. If your walls are caving in, you can push them back out. You can kind of reshape the top, so it is sturdy enough to kind of mold a little bit. You're not going to be able to change the shape a whole lot, but you can really work with it a little bit to get a better symmetrical shape, or straighten up the walls, or some of that other stuff. The other thing I did is I put a coat of Mod Podge on the bottom and the sides here, just to hold down some of the raw edges that were coming up and to flatten down the bottom. So I did add just a coat of the glossy Mod Podge. You do want to make sure you get all of the kind of spider webby glue parts off when you use a glue gun. You know, you get all those threads. You want to clean those up before you put the Mod Podge on. And the next step is just to add my coat of metallic silver spray paint. So I'll be back when I have this painted. So here's my basket after I put the silver spray paint on there. I didn't worry about spray painting the bottom of the basket because it's not going to show. If you want to, you certainly could do that, but I just did the edges and the corners. And then you could leave it like this, but I don't think that it looks terribly realistic as far as a metallic finish goes. So I like to age the finish a little bit, make it look a little more antique-y. And there's probably a lot of different ways that you can do this, but the easiest way that I always use is just by adding a little bit of black paint. I have a little water here to water down the paint, and then some paper towel to dab off the finish once I brush it on there. And you can make it darker or lighter. I'm probably going to put a fairly light coat on here for my finish, because you can always make it darker. Alright, so like I said, this is a really simple finish. It's one of my favorite ways to kind of just add a more antique-y look to some of the metallic paints that are out there. So I'm going to start with my paintbrush, and I'm just going to dip it in the water, and then I'm going to add some black paint. and brush that on a small area. If you want a darker finish, you can use more paint than water. If you want a lighter finish, you can add a little water. And then once I have a small area painted, I'm going to take my wadded up paper towel and just dab off some of the finish. And if I want to, I can darken it up, which I think I'm going to put a little bit more black on there to get a little more definition in the paint. And that's all there is to it. I'm just going to move on to the next section until I have the whole basket covered, and then we'll be back to put the whole thing together. So here is my finished little pad that I'm going to be able to take out and throw in the washer that I cut out of the t-shirt fabric. And I just sewed the two pieces together with a blanket stitch and then put just a little bit of stuffing in it and did some little tacking stitches to make it more of a quilted shape. The one thing I will say is I should have added probably about an inch when I was cutting out these ovals all the way around, because it does shrink up a little bit when you add the padding, and I wasn't really thinking about that when I did the original design. So you definitely want to make this oval bigger than the base and the foam piece. The other thing I'll say is I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about blanket stitches. There's a lot of videos out there that you can check out if you want to learn how to do a blanket stitch, and certainly you could make your pad in any way that you wanted. So here's the basket once I've finished putting it all together. My foam is on the bottom and then my little pad is on top. It turned out a little bit bigger than I wanted it to, but I think it looks better than the blanket that was there before. So that's it for today's video. If you've made your own paper basket projects, please let me know in the comments how they turned out and what you made. And also, if you enjoyed today's video, please do give it a thumbs up. I hope to see you in the next video.